Picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue.
Well, good morning. Welcome back. It is finally time to do the clipper. Had put this off for a couple of weeks, and I don't know how quickly we're going to be able to rush through this, because it strikes me, the first thing that strikes me immediately is that I am dangerously short on white paint. I have to see if I can find some. So if I can't, then we paint something else this week. But not to say that it has been far from my mind, because we have been working diligently behind the scenes like tiny elves, working on making this a better kit than it is. It's a fine kit. It's a huge kit. It's a lovely size. It's going to be a pleasure to light. Again, one of those kits that you're going to end up making better than what was on screen, because, or more functional, because it was on screen for like that. And even then, you didn't get much out of it, other than the fact you get the one scene of Sleepy Floyd in his floating pen, which was my college band. Sleepy Floyd and the Floating Pens. But we're going to do something to add some zhuzh to it. And I have been working with a couple different collaborators. I've been working with the great Jeffrey Fink on some 3D printed parts, and I've also been working with wonderful Keith over at Cosmic Scale Models on another aspect of it. So well, they're both closely related. Let's get down to the table and I'll show you. Okay, hopefully by now, if you recognize the pink parts, you'll know that yes, I've been a printing puppy on the pink parts. We're going with the P alliterations again. First thing was the ceiling. Now here is the stock ceiling part. There's the stock ceiling part, and look at all, if you were going to light this, look at all the holes you would have to clean out in order to light this. Well, almost easier to redesign the whole piece with the windows already, or the lighting access already put in. You see solid color behind her, so it's easier to tell. But you can see all of the openings are already in it for the windows. Now, you may think this was a fairly easy part to for Jeffrey, man of his skills, to whip up, but he doesn't have the kit. I have the kit, he doesn't have the kit, so we kind of back and forth, and I sent pictures and tracings and diagrams of the parts that go around it, and we kind of worked from there. This is version 5A, if that tells you anything. We went through several revisions, both in the angles of the ceiling and the length, and the length and the breadth, and getting everything to fit front and back to get to this point. And it's been incremental. Move this in a millimeter, move that out a millimeter, that kind of stuff. So I think we're finally down to a part that is going to work well for us. And then we have this pile of figures. These are all figures that are from Keith Tollinson over at Cosmic Scale Models, and then sized up and down to make them fit, just to make sure. And I've taken a seat and shrunk the figures down. Now, it's widely known that the inside of this model is not 72 scale, even though the outside of it is. The inside is closer to 100 scale, and even at that, some figuring had to be done in order to make the people fit inside these rather narrow chairs. And the nice thing about having to go through so many revisions of the ceiling was that every time I printed it, I would just put 8 or 10 people on that same plate and let it print. Well, I end up with a big pile of people here while we're doing our work over here. So we've got a mixture of his original Ares figures. So we have some of the stewardesses, which is important because they did use the same stewardess costume. Even though I can't see why Well, I can see why, because he's a filmmaker. But why Kubrick went through all the fuss and muss of designing and building the elaborate set for the Orion and then only used it in basically 2 shots seemed rather wasteful, but that's how they made movies back then. But these are, in a twist of irony, some of his Moonbase Alpha figures. So they're almost right. I mean, if it weren't for the little comm locks on their waist, on the belt, you would never know. What we just needed was a good generic seated figure, male and female. And then we have, let's see, we have some floating arm people, which is, you know, if you're strapped in and you got no gravity, your arms are going to float like Haywood Floyd's did. And then we've got some that have the, I think these are Ares figures that have the food trays. In case they wanted to eat something, they can use the same food trays. And again, here's one of the standing stewardesses. But there's enough here, I think, that I can populate all of these chairs and have a full house. Because by the time you get these in here, they're not going to sit by themselves without being glued in because of the angle of the chair. But we're going to have, I think, more than enough figures here. See, we've even got some nice cross-leggedy figures, and I think this is a stewardess. No, this is just an alpha. This is just an alpha figure. So I would not be surprised if we did not see Keith providing these as smaller figures for the Ares here. Painting them at this tiny size is going to be a treat, but I can just go nuts on the coloring, and actually that's where, between all of the grays and blacks and whites and silvers of the interior, I can do some color just in the passengers. That would be nice. And of course, you know, all of this is for my giggles, because once you close everything up, it is one of those cases that you rarely see it, too much of the detail anyway. But that's why we have all of the holes in the ceiling, so that we can run some light strip down the center and maybe throw some light into this cabin. And it fits together like this when we're all said and done. And of course, I've got a couple pilot figures that I can use in the window up front. So we're going to start with those 2 segments and then kind of build the rest of the ship out around it. Okay, with as many people as I've got printed, it looks like I'm going to have to make one more print run. And that is because, even tiny as they are, the pilot figures that I want to use are still a smidge too big, because the pilot seats are smaller, even yet more small than, I'm trying to find where they are. It's in this mess somewhere. Shout it out if you can see it. Here it is. The actual chairs. It's even smaller than the actual chair, which is what I've been basing everything on. So we're going to have to, and also I'm going to chew this area out in front here, because rather than trying to knock the legs off of these pilots to make them fit, it'll be easier just to chew out underneath the dashboard there, and then fit this in the side of the cockpit area. But yeah, we've got even less headroom here. It's jammed in there so tight that even the ceiling doesn't go the whole way across the top. So we're at a stage of how much of this are you ever going to see when it does come time to look through the cockpit window. So by the time you get everything here pieced together, that's the view you're going to have. And of course, there's just enough room there to throw a micro SM LED, and of course it's going to be red because all of the cockpits in 2001 were red. So there's no reason not to. And it looks like there is some effort to light the sides of these, but I don't know if we're going to do that or not. I mean, there's a reason why they made that little divot in there and poked a hole all the way through. have to see if there's anything special in the instructions about that. But you know, instructions are for wimps. We don't, stinking instructions. So I'm going to start laying some of these out and at least get a primer coat of gray on them. Gray up the floor and the ceiling and all that kind of stuff. Maybe we'll get that done today while the tiny people are printing. Good morning, everybody. It's Tuesday and work is continuing on the passenger cabin of the Aries and working with these tiny figures. Now, these are not 1/72 figures because the scale of the interior is not the same scale as the exterior. But I am working on getting some wee people to fit into the wee chairs. It's going to be a chore to paint all of these, but I think it's going to be fun. I don't know, it's one of those things that's diminishing returns on how much you're going to see through the window, but we're going to give it some fun. I am very pleased to announce that the ceiling, through all of the variations and trials, is finished. This is the Jeffrey Fink ceiling. The last task was to put the tabs on it that lock into the front and back walls, and we've got a lovely ceiling now. So all we need to do is obviously paint it and light it. I am happy with how everything fits together like that. Lovely. And once you light it, you will see the people in there. It's really a question of how much of these people are going to be seen. First thing to do would be obviously to put the chair in, put all the chairs in, and then it's just going to be a matter of seeing their heads, I'm sure. There's going to be more than enough times where we're probably going to have to chop the feet off of them because sometimes they don't give you enough foot room in a model. It's not, let me see if I keep losing the chair. Where is the chair part? And it's probably sitting in amongst all of these people. I'll find it. But fitting the chair down to the base. Let's move that just to make sure it's not sitting underneath it. No, it's one of those things. It's here somewhere. It'll show up as soon as I turn the camera off. But anyway, we need to glue down all the chairs. I'm going to put a lighter gray on the side panels, on the padded walls, and carry that into the area. I'm making masks now so that I can leave the door, paint the door, and then paint around it. So that's the kind of stuff I'm working on today, and then we'll get that and the cabin put together. Again, here is a problem with the cabin in that the chairs for that are even smaller than the there it is. It was stuck to one of the figures. You probably saw that and were screaming it. But sometimes when you put a figure in a chair and then put that chair on the floor, there's not a lot of foot room. Now in this case it does happen to work, but I don't know what the legroom situation is going to be on the passenger cabin, so something like that. But the tiny chairs are even smaller up front, so I'm going to cut out an area on the front of here, just knock a notch out of there so you can stick feet in underneath the dashboard there. So there's that. There is the roof of the the cabin that we did not make a replacement for, but basically we're just going to cut. I can trim these out because it's like trimming out 4 holes or 2 holes as opposed to, Jagundus a number here. So trim those out. We'll put a light behind it, so that'll light that cabin up. Okay, I'm battling headspace. No, that's not my mental state. I am battling headroom. There is no max headroom in this kit. This is one of the figures trimmed down. Now you can see it is. This is how he fits in the seat. I mean, the The arm comes from the armrest up. I mean, this is the chair. And you can see where his little noggin sticks up a little high. And that is basically scraping the ceiling. If we put it in the area in which it goes, we can see that there is ever so little headroom there, but I think that's as good as we're going to get. I can try to sink him down in the chair a little bit more, but we're running out of wiggle room. That's pretty much where it has to sit. And when you look down the nose and look into the cabin there, you will see that his head does not quite touch the ceiling, but also he does not have any room to sit up straighter. Ironically, there's all the room in the world for the back seats. Back seats aren't going to be a problem, and I think I'm even going to have room to stand a stewardess right in the center there. I could probably stand a regular figure right there in the middle too. That's the only, I think the only standing figure that I have is a stewardess. So we would have room to put one, and that would make a nice silhouette for the red light, which is going to go right about here. I can pop a red light there, which will shine down into the rest of the cabin. But now I know that Paul is working on a replacement for this cockpit. It's just the question of I'm not waiting that long for that to happen. I think a photo etched folded up cabin would be perfect, because that would make all the walls thinner. That would make it a lot easier to give you more headspace, more breathing room. But like I said, that could be weeks away, and so when you fit the two cabins together, they kind of look like that. It's weird that you have this whole big plane, and yet the windows, you have 5 windows in each side, that you don't carry the passenger cabin further back. But like I said, I can't believe they spent this much time and energy on a ship that is only in a scant few moments of the film itself. Good morning, everybody. It's Wednesday, and we're back at it on the Clipper, and things are picking up at a clip, so to speak. I am putting the seats in, finally. I've got the, of course, I painted them en masse on the sprue, which meant as soon as I clipped them off the sprue, it left me a spot that needs to be touched up, but that's easy enough to do. But I went with the window seats first, and while 2001 was very good at predicting a lot of future trends, one of the things they got right was the fact that there would be a day when window seats very rarely lined up with windows, and that's how this is functioning. I'm noticing that about the first one does, the next to the last one does, and maybe the third one does, but none of them really line up with the windows. So spot on there, TWA or / Pan Am. Now that I've got the outside seats in, I can go ahead and put the inside seats, and then I can start assigning them to the wee people that are going to be going in. I've also got the seats in the cabin. Now I'm going back and forth whether or not that cabin is going to have a red light in it or a white light in it. While it's true that the EVA pod, the Moon Bus, and the Ares all had red cockpits, it's also true that Discovery didn't. And there's reason to believe, well, there's enough photos showing the scenes in the movie where we showed the cockpit of the Clipper, and it did not. So I'm rethinking whether or not to put a red light in there. I wanted to do it just to juice up some of the color interest, but I'm thinking that maybe a warm white instead of a cool white might be the way to go. I'm going to play with that some more. Also, one other thing. What was it? I had one other thing. Oh, I've been painting up the replacement ceiling and the walls, the front wall and back wall. So that will all be ready to go today. And of course I'm going to be putting lighting across the top of that. Well, it'll be helpful if it was in camera. I'll put a strip across there. I don't know how much spill light I'm going to bother to try to put over the sides. I don't think the side, well, in the movie it is true that the side lights weren't on except over the seat where Floyd was sleeping. See, even Floyd couldn't stay awake for that long flight. He probably had the Blue Danube playing on the plane and put him to sleep. But we're gonna see whether or not we need to put any lights, or whether the like I say, the spill light is going to be enough to do that. I think I overlit the Aries, so I'm going to try to maybe underlight this and see how well that works. The problem with that is, and then we're back to mixing lighting strip, SMLED strip, with the other we're mixing strip lighting and bulb lighting, and sometimes that causes the batteries to fight each other. So we're going to have to see. Usually you overcome that with using a transformer or wall wart and not using batteries. And I don't know if this plane, since it's got a clear stand and all that, I don't know whether we want to forego using a battery, or can we make a battery compartment, or do we need to run power out to it? See, even the compressor's got an opinion. So we're going to see. Obviously the easiest thing to do would be to run 9-volt power from a transformer and not worry about compatibilities of batteries and all of that. But we're going to have to see. We're not sure yet. Forgive the noise in the background, but I got two things to talk about today. One is the particularly colorful crowd here. Now, these are rough colors. I have got to finesse all of that, but I wanted to see how they were going to look inside the cabin. And there's a few cases where they're going to have to be lopped off at the knees. That was more or less expected. I just didn't expect to do quite as much. You have the ceiling, that'll all go down on there. The big news is how much has to be taken off of the cockpit, because that barely fits as it is. The other big news is, dun dun dun, painted logo. Wanted to see if I could do it. Looks like I can. I could see where this might have needed to be bumped up just a tiny bit here, from that edge to that edge. So what I'll do is I'll strip all this off and redo it. But I wanted to see if these lines were going to be too fine, or if the lettering was going to be too detailed to work. But no, I think it'll do. But that's the lesson learned there. This is really tedious stuff, painting all these tiny figures. Man, oh man. Here's the exceptionally tight fit that I was talking about. I've got the cockpit more or less put together, and I've got the wee pilot in there, and I think I'm going to have to shave the wee pilot down even more than that. Or I could sand some of the ceiling part away, but by the time you get everything sit in there, that does not leave hardly any room. Those chairs really need to be further down, like lowering this whole floor. So we'll see. Good morning, everybody. Look at this mess. It's Thursday. It's the gateway to the weekend. And I want to finish up the week with some lighting. So I am working out the channels that I need to nibble out of the wing piece. One up here for the front light. One here for the wing strobe. Well, they won't strobe, but it'll be a wing light. And then we have to cut a channel to get into the center of the beast itself. So I'm trying to map out all those kind of things. And because this piece overlaps this piece, not only do I have to take this channel out, I have to cut a little channel on the side of that. So I'm trying to get all of my mapping done so that I get the tool out a minimum number of times and make all of my cuts and all of my mess, hopefully, at the same time. I did want to start the morning with a couple of success stories. One I've got the side long name printed or painted on. I was able to do that the same way I did this lovely little guy from yesterday. I'm working out a way that on the template itself, the template itself has the lettering obviously, but it also has a bounding box. And what I'm going to do is make it so the bottom of the bounding box is what you line up with this windowsill. That'll give you your nice straight line, because the tape is going to kind of be tough to see through. I got to do the same thing with this guy to mark out where on the ball to lay this, because this came out fine, but it's a little bit thinner down here than it is up there, so the whole thing needed to shift up just a smidge. But that's why we test things, so that we can work out those kinks. Speaking of kinks, continuing to do battle with the cockpit today, and I'm thinking that really what I would like to do is I've test fit the frame in there and the window front. I think what I'd like to do is knock this piece out and knock that piece out, and basically set the whole cockpit down just about the width of a piece of plastic. Just about the width of that. It's about as high as it needs to be. So I think that's like a 1/16 or maybe a thin 1/8 of an inch. But if I knock that down just a little bit, that's going to give me the headroom for my figures that I really want. I'm going to leave these side pieces in because that dictates how close to the wall it goes. But I think we can live without these guys. And I did notice it made it very hard to try to fit the other side in there as well. This, you can see how much damage this side has taken just from trying to fit the other side up against it. Okay, let me tell you where we're at today. A little bit of a, not necessarily a 2 steps forward, 1 step back type of deal, but I had an opportunity while we were still at this stage, before I got too far down the road, that I could make an adaptation of the ceiling of the main cabin that I wanted to go ahead and do. That would allow me to put a single strand of strip lights, and these are not Paul's HD strip lights. These are actually the ones that Elliot sent that are on this cloth backdrop or backing. But what it's going to allow me to do is I have adapted the ceiling part that I printed from, this is the Great Jeff Fink ceiling, that allowed me to lay them in straight and flush like that. And I believe that's going to provide me enough lighting that I don't need to worry about any side lights. I don't have to worry about running any lights down the sides. Now, when I had tried this earlier, I had not painted them white yet, so I was getting that pink glow from the pink resin. So let me see how this looks now that I don't have that to worry about, and I can report that it is a yay and a helpful. And by the time I lay that on top, that is going to give me quite a nice amount of light without having to worry about putting any lights down these side strips. I think that's going to be plenty. It's still kind of pinkish. I think what I need to do is hit some of this outer area where I might be getting a little bit of light bounce with some gray or black primer to take care of some of that. But turn off the lights here so you can see. I don't care about this light leak. That's going to happen up inside the cabin. But that's a gracious amount of lighting inside there. And now I can finish off my people that are going to go in here. Also, I was working on something that I think I'm going to end up doing a little bit of tulip blocking on, which is a little strip of cools that I can put in the cabin. See, here's the cabin roof. And if I push that cabin down a little bit, then I'll be able to light that up. So it's telling me that I need to fix the paint on some of these little screens because they're going to be a lot more visible now than they were. And I can also put a couple people in there. So yeah, that's all this stuff is. It's the while you're at it. So I've got a bad case of the while you're at it, and the next step is to do what I was thinking earlier, and that is to lower this down into the fuselage of the main hull. Okay, I think I've got a better idea of how to show you what I'm doing with the cab, or the cockpit here. This is approximately where it used to sit. It used to sit way up like that. Can you see that? Let me check the camera, make sure everything's happy in the angle there. It used to sit up like that. That's better. And you look down it. But now it's going to sit just about the thickness of a piece of plastic further down. So it's going to sit something like that. Now what that's going to allow to have happen is when you look straight at it, you're going to see the tops of the seats, which is where the heads of the pilots are going to be. And I think that's going to, let me put a pilot in here real fast. You may recognize this guy if you know your British sci-fi. So we're going to sit him in. See, all of a sudden he's not smacking his head on the ceiling anymore. And when you look in the front window, you will see his head. Well, you'll see his shoulders and head. You won't see him craned up against the ceiling. So that's a good thing. And now that I think that we've got the right setting, what I can do now is put a new brace in, or a new piece of plastic in, for the cockpit to sit on. That is basically going to be a piece that kind of lives under where that was, and then the new cockpit will sit that much further down. Good morning, everybody. It's Friday. It's the last work day of the week, the last work day on this clipper, and we're finally going to start getting some stuff together. I think today's goal might just be attainable, and I'm hoping to get everything buttoned up. If certainly I won't get everything painted, but I want to get everything closed up, starting with the cockpit. Now, yes, I have strayed. I have lost my way, you might say. I've gone off the beaten path. I put pilots in here that aren't dressed in white airline captain suits. You know why? You want to know why? I'll tell you why. The rest of the freaking cockpit's white. It's white and black, and I don't want to put another white and black stuff in there. So these are little figures that I had gotten from Keith over at Cosmic Scale Models. He sent me some STLs to print up. These have to be smaller than 72 scale because this, obviously the interior is not 72 scale. It's closer to 100. So these are tiny, tiny figures. And the seats are not spacious. So I had to Dremel out some of the seat area to get the figures to fit. And these you may recognize are very tiny Alpha Eagle pilots. And I think it's very appropriate since, you know, 1999 is the stepchild of 2001, even though it's a couple years, you know, set a couple years earlier, if you want to get into the math. But I think they make great pilot costumes. I've got a couple of Aries stewardesses that I've scaled down that are in the back. And what I really like is the silhouette of the stewardess against the door. I'm going to use that in the passenger cabin as well. But I don't know how much of this you'll see once you get it inside the body. But I wanted to make sure that, you know, at least I knew what was going on in there. I'm really surprised. I'm surprised because it is an obvious thing, and you will see it. I am kind of surprised that there was no decal provided for the main console here. Just something colorful with red and blue buttons. I might try to just daub some color on there just to, break up all that black. It is surprisingly visual, or visible, should I say. So we're going to put this, wrap this up, finish it, put it in the side of the hull, and then we're going to move on to the passenger cabin. Now, I've painted up a lot of these figures, but Lord knows I'm going to have to do some surgery, some amputations to get everybody to fit. I've put my own little private jokes in here. I've got a couple of red shirts. I've got a couple of Alphans in here. If you might notice the familiar garb of this guy. I'll make sure he's in a window, but this looks like it could be Commander Morrow, but with one sleeve. So maybe he's taking a jaunt back up to the moon base. But they're not all going to fit in here. There's, like I said, there's going to be a goodly amount of amputations that need to be done, but I'm to the point now where I need to put them in the seats and then paint any detail that remains visible after that point. I can't really, well, that's also going to make them easier to handle since I'm not grabbing it by the tiniest of little grippers. I can actually put everything and put the people in their seats and then paint what's visible. And then I'll have, like I said, a stewardess at the back door, maybe one halfway up, and then another with at the front door. So that's what I'm going to do. Get that much done today. Thank you, Mr. Compressor. And then see if we can get for a last trick, we'll get the wings all lit up. That would be fun. Okay, I'm taking a bit of a break from all the tiny people, and I'm working on the wing lights here, and I'm taking advantage of a lovely gift that I got from Rob Schmidt. He of the Metropolis Spotlights. He had sent me a circuit board a while ago, and I was trying to find the best place to use it. What this is basically it's a step down voltage thing, I believe. But it's got a little trimmable dial on there, and it's like a resistor that you can dim things down with, and that's what I wanted to do, because I like using these SM LEDs, but I don't always like them at their full brightness, and this has allowed me to just to turn these down a little bit so they're not nearly as bright as they normally are. So yay, and thank you, Rob. I'm glad I finally got a suitable place to use these. Oh, wait. It's still obvious. I mean, they're still there, but they're not nearly as in your face as these SM LEDs can be. So now I'm going to run similar wires and lights up to the front for the cool white headlights, spotlights, and then I'll be able to close these wings up. Okay, now that the wings are all glued on, I can show you I've got the headlights on here. Let's go ahead and kill this overhead. We've got the headlights on there. I've got the wingtip lights on, and I really like the idea that they've been tuned down a little bit, that they're not blindingly bright. Now, here was a mistake I made. I glued this wing down before I painted in the intakes and the exhaust there. Learned that lesson a little too late, but I did learn it. Went ahead and painted those areas on the wings before I put that wing down, and it's a whole lot neater of a job. Now, obviously that's going to be painted over, but, you know, word to the wise, when you're putting this thing together, go ahead and paint the insides of those before you put the wings down. And I've also cut a couple access holes in the bottom of this. I don't know if I'm going to need them, but now's the best time to do it. So this is ready to go down. I think the next step is going to be to go ahead and glue the cockpit in. The windshield and the window frame, I believe I can put on from the outside. I will double check that before I glue those in. I need to go ahead and put the windows in the sides of the fuselage, And the last thing to do would be, I've got all the Wii figures glued in, is I'm just going to run a quick paintbrush over some of these bits and clean up some detail, and then we'll be ready to close up that cabin, put the new roof on, and then that will be ready to be glued into the fuselage. I don't think we will get the fuselage itself glued down to the wings today. I think that may be a little ambitious. Alrighty, I think I'm done with all the tiny people. Yeah, they're way colorful, and I'm sure once the light hits them, they're going to be even more so. But I wanted to get a nice cross-section in there. You might notice some Alphans in there. You might notice a red shirt or two in there. You might notice Cadet Uhura right there, right up front. She was front of mine, so I wanted to put her in front of seat. And we have a science officer. We have a command officer. We've got enough interesting things. We've got a couple people with trays. All I need to do now is put the stewardesses down, and I never put a stewardess down. Flight attendants. Of course, back then they were stewardesses. Back then in the future, that means. But yeah, let me put the flight attendants on the deck, and then we'll be ready to put the roof on. Okay, I've got the ceiling all sealed up and lights on, and as expected, it's less than awesome, but you can definitely see there are people in there. That was the important thing. Make it look like it's lived in, or at least being used as public transportation. So all's good in the hood. While we're here, we're going to seal up. Actually, we're not going to seal up the hull today, I don't think, but I can, in the hour or so that I've got left, I can get these two compartments attached and epoxied in and ready to go. Who knows? You know what? What's stopping me? What is stopping me from sealing the two sides up? As long as I can trail a wire out through one of these holes, I'm good. So if I take that off and I can attach a wire to the cabin and run that out the same hole, that's all I need to seal up the two sides. That might make a good place to stop for today. The deck here goes on from the outside. The windshield goes on from the outside. It's been curing. I've got the frame and the windshield together. That goes in from the outside. Everything else attaches from the outside. Now, clamps are going to be useless on this because of the rounded shape. But if I got some rubber bands out and some tape, I should be able to tape up the sides. It's going to be a lot of these glue points are going to have to be hit simultaneously, so I'm going to need something slow acting. I can't use any fast acting epoxy. I think even the CA, I'm not sorry, the CA would be way too fast. I'm thinking even the MEK might be too quick. But let's go ahead and get these guys epoxied in, and then we'll go from there. Okay, I'm doing a test fitting to see how everything is riding before I get the glue out. And yes, we can see in the windows. Yes, we can see into the cockpit. Got no wires being pinched. I can see where everything needs to be brought together. It's going to need a lot of tape and more than a few rubber bands, but a lot of tape primarily. So I'm going to get that out and get it ready. And then we are going to get some 5-minute epoxy out and just start. Actually, I think the 15-minute epoxy is going to be better because it's going to give me more wiggle room. Okay, cool. Let's do that. And this is where we're going to leave it for the rest of the weekend. Everything is bound up. I'm going to let that epoxy cure for a good long while. This is not glued down. I just have them sitting together. I've got the wiring in the wings. I've got the wiring and the lights in the cockpit and the passenger compartment. Still have miles to go before we sleep. I've got all the painting to do on this next week. So that's what we're going to do next time. And like I just said, that's where we're going to leave it for this week. I've got the majority of it built. I've got the tail end to put on. And then we are down to painting, but getting all of the compartments in and the lighting in. And more importantly, getting those the logos and the text painted on and getting that methodology squared away. I'm going to leave, it's going to leave room for a big old honking logo I'm going to put right there. Cover up this overgrown Aurora base with the Western Hemisphere on there, and for some reason Australia. We're going to cover that up, and we're going to put a big old Pan Am logo on it. Copyright be damned, I'm going to do it. So that's next time. So until then, y'all be good, be safe, be smart, enjoy some turkey. Next week, of course, we've got Thanksgiving here in the States next week, so I don't know if yeah, I should be able to finish this with that, even with that impediment of the, I call it an impediment. It's time with family. But even with that day off, I should be able to finish up the painting on this next time. So until then, be safe, be smart, be back next time.